Hello everyone, today I want to talk a little bit about the new Hearthstone adventure coming up, One Night in Karazhan. It was just announced, and while people have been kind of suspecting that we'd be going to Karazhan for the next adventure for a while, I don't think anyone really anticipated a Karazhan like this, rather than the sort of empty, haunted tower that we all knew from World of Warcraft. We are instead going to an epic party thrown by Medivh, complete with a logo that looks like it came from My Little Pony. Regardless, I definitely think that this is going to be super sweet, and if nothing else, new cards are always the lifeblood of any collectible card game, and that's what we're mostly here to look at. So, the first card that was revealed, the first card I'm going to talk about, is Ivory Night. This is a card that I'm not really super excited about. It is, a 6-cost 4/4 battlecry. Discover a spell, restore health to your hero equal to its cost. While a 6-cost 4/4 is not a terribly good body, this could theoretically both offer value in terms of generating a spell, as well as provide some significant health restoration to your hero to keep you alive. The jury's kind of out in this in my mind, because the body you're getting is pretty terrible. Compare this to, say, Cult Apothecary or Healbot, both of which are, pretty big heal effects you could possibly use. Compare it to Tuskar Jouster, which is a heal effect, though an unreliable one, that doesn't really get a ton of use already, with much better stats for its cost. This, you can't really bank on this healing you for a lot, particularly given that Paladin has so many cheap spells, including a bunch of 1-cost secrets. You can maybe get a Lay on Hands to heal yourself for 8, and then also give you a Lay on Hands to use later. You can maybe get an Enter the Coliseum to heal yourself for 6, and then you have an Enter the Coliseum to use later, but you're not guaranteed to get any of these things. And I think that generally when you want to put healing in your deck, especially when you're playing a Paladin deck, you want to really be able to rely on the fact that that card is going to heal you. That's a big part of the reason we don't see Tuskar Jouster, is that you really need to be able to bank on the healing effect when you need it. And Ivory Night does not allow you to do that, because the range that you can potentially heal yourself for is so wide that it's often just going to be, oh, look, here's a Blessing of Might, a Blessing of Wisdom, and a Noble Sacrifice. This is a terrible, terrible card right now. So I'm open to be wrong, just because this is a card that offers, both the card draw effect of the Discover, obviously some flexibility as well there, as well as the restoration to your health. That combination of effects has the potential to be powerful. We look at Ethereal Conjurer. It's a strong card in a lot of mage decks, and it's kind of similar. It's a bit stronger body in the front, a little bit easier to kill, and has a Discover effect without the life gain attached. So maybe in the right style of deck this could find a home, but my initial inclination is that it's not very strong. Next up, we have the Kindly Grandmother, which, of course, death rattles into the Big Bad Wolf. This is kind of reminiscent of Haunted Creeper. Haunted Creeper is a card that was pretty ubiquitous in aggressive style decks that had ways to utilize the extra bodies. A Hunter definitely has use for a cheap beast that leaves a beast behind when it dies. Interestingly, we've seen Hunter decks right now tend to be very, very tempo-oriented, and there also aren't nearly as many 1-health 1-drops as there were in previous formats. We don't really see Leper Gnome seeing play. Abusive Sergeant is still popular, but not necessarily alongside as many other 1-health minions. So the upfront body of Kindly Grandmother doesn't really necessarily trade with as much, like Haunted Creeper did at the time. There aren't necessarily as many Divine Shields on things like Shield's Minibot that you want to knock off with the front half and then get your second half. And also Kindly Grandmother, in the instance of Shield's Minibot, would still actually just straight up trade with the Divine Shield, then the Minibot itself over the course of 2 turns, unlike the Creeper, which could use all of his pieces of trade but could potentially get extra value because the other ones don't necessarily have to attack into the 2/2. So this, I think is a pretty solid card in the right style of deck. We've already seen a number of solid 2-drops for Hunters right now. There's kind of a variety of options between the King's Elec and Huge Toad, and some people even playing more things in addition to that, like Flame Juggler. I don't know that this is necessarily going to replace any of those, simply because what you care about most in the 100 decks that tend to be played right now is usually board presence that you immediately get from the minion, its ability to attack right away. This, of course, just being a 1/1 up front. It does give you the sticky body that can support Houndmaster and Kill Command, and it works very well with Abusive Sergeant because you can potentially get a trade off the first half and then still get the back half. So if we do see this, it'll of course, I think, be in a Hunter deck that uses cards like that in order to get advantage of the fact that it is difficult to kill and does leave that beast on board. All right, so Barnes. This is the stage manager of the Karazhan Opera House, which was definitely one of the cooler events and encounters in Karazhan. The play within the game, or play within the play, or whatever you want to call it. But Barnes, I think, is very cool in terms of both representing the actor playing the character. It's just this wimpy guy who might be playing a fantastically strong guy like Ragnaros, which would be a pretty powerful minion to pull out with Barnes. I think this works with a lot of the same cards that Herald Village at least theoretically works with. We haven't really seen Herald Village do much work at all, just because it's so hard to set up. But this kind of preemptively does the same thing. It's good with things that have static powers, like Ragnaros, like, say, Confessor Peltris, Ysera, and it's very good with Death Rattle minions as well, because you don't really care necessarily about the body. Interestingly, this can also work with cards that return things to your hand or create copies to your hand. I believe Barnes plus Shadow Step or Barnes plus Shadow Caster. Well, Shadow Caster will obviously give you 1/1, but ways to bounce back the thing. You can get the full-sized minion potentially back into your hand. And I imagine you can also silence this, which obviously, like Herald Village, if you summon a large minion with Barnes and then you somehow silence the minion, I believe that minion will then become a full-size version of itself. So I could, imagine not a very good deck, but a deck with silence effects, Barnes, and overstated minions. Maybe you're playing an Eerie Statue deck. You get your 7/7s for 4 going on, but you get even more of them with Barnes. So anyway, definitely a cool card, one that will be difficult to consistently make work in a way that you want, but I'm sure that I will mess around with it, and I'm sure other people enjoy doing that too. All right, Ethereal Peddler. This is the guy who you went to sell all your junk that you picked up in Karazhan and repair your gear. That's at least how I remember him. But this is an interesting card because by itself it's just a 5/6 for 5, which is a fine stat line that we haven't actually seen tons of. Obviously, Pit Fighter has that, and there have been a few other minions with those stats. But Peddler obviously comes along with a reasonably significant power if you are able to enable it. If you're playing a deck that has Undercity Hucksters, Burgles, perhaps other cards of that ilk, Peddler's ability can actually be relatively effective because reduced cost by 2 of anything really can be pretty powerful. The concern, of course, is that this doesn't necessarily happen when you actually play the card. You need to have it go off on curve, and you also need to have something that you care about being reduced. Often one of the issues with cards like Burgle or Huckster is you get cards that don't really either mesh with your strategy or are extremely situational or just generally useless. Reducing the cost of Shatter to 0 is not really going to do anything because you can't really use a Shatter. But it does have the potential to not only give you big tempo plays, but obviously just by itself be a respectable body on the board. So I think that maybe you could imagine a deck being built around these kinds of effects if we see a high enough density of them. But in order for me to really feel like I wanted to put this card in my deck, I feel like I'd need more than just Huckster. Maybe I'd also want Burgle, but Burgle itself is really, really low impact. Obviously does nothing on the board. And that's kind of not exactly what Rogue's looking for. Rogue really needs to play, generally speaking, a tempo-oriented game in order to survive, simply because it doesn't really have healing, has a hero power that requires it to take damage anytime it wants to use it for removal. So maybe if there's enough additional tools on top of Huckster, because I don't think Burgle really works well enough to support this sort of thing, this could see play. But I'm not really going to bet on it. So I'm selling Ethereal Peddler. All right, the Curator. This is probably my favorite of the cards that we've seen so far, not necessarily because it's particularly good, because I don't think it is particularly good, but because I think it's just super cool. I love cards like this that encourage you to build your deck in kind of a weird way, and then gain some sort of advantage from it. One of the interesting things about Curator, obviously you don't even necessarily have to have all three of the types in your deck to get an advantage from this. If you just have a beast and a dragon, this is still a 4/6 that draws you 2 cards when you play it. 4/6 taunt, of course, which is relevant as well. If you do have a Murloc and a dragon and a beast, it draws 3 cards. But it's not only draw 3 cards, it's draw those 3 specific cards. So you could very easily have a deck that has just 1 beast, 1 dragon, 1 Murloc, and this, and you're doubling the chances that you draw any of the specific copies of any of those cards. Because, you draw Curator, well, you're guaranteed to draw your dragon. Or you draw your dragon, well, you already drew your dragon. So, hey, there's twice as much. That has a pretty big impact on the kind of things you can do in terms of deck design. If you are particularly reliant on, say, drawing, Chromagus for whatever reason, your weird Chromagus combo deck. This helps significantly in terms of ensuring that you will have access to your Chromagus. I could imagine the Curator potentially being in some sort of weird combo deck that really wants to Alexstrasza its opponent because, hey, you have Alexstrasza in your deck, now you have the Curator to double your chances of drawing Alexstrasza. I think that it's unlikely that it'll really see play in that way, simply because combo decks that want to draw Alexstrasza in Hearthstone right now can just draw a ton of cards instead of trying to play something that specifically draws them that Alexstrasza. There's just so many ways that you can draw through your deck right now already, which is a totally different issue, but is an issue nonetheless. That does make the sort of tutor capability of Curator a little less exciting, simply because you don't really have need for that if you can just more or less guarantee that you can draw your entire deck throughout the course of a game to combo people off anyway. But I definitely think that the potential of the Curator is really interesting, and especially as the card pool grows, I think this is the sort of card that may be more interesting as time goes on, maybe more interesting in Wild than it is in Standard, just because the possibilities are broader. Obviously, there's lots of good beasts, there's lots of good dragons, lots of excellent dragons. Murlocs may be the sort of questionable one as far as decks trying to be able to find one to put into their deck. Maybe you end up playing a Sir Finley in a deck that may want to swap its hero power. But generally speaking, control decks will typically be classes that already have a pretty good hero power for control games. And the Curator is a card that is pretty obviously going to go into a slower mid-range or controlling style of deck. So it's maybe not going to be a Hunter card, but who knows? Maybe you put this into Control Hunter and you get your Savannah Highmane and, whatever awesome dragon and Sir Finley to try to find armor up to last longer and whatever else. Definitely the sort of card that also, by the way, feels like it fits right at home in a Reno deck, because you can have one copy of, all these various things, of course, and the Curator can help you find those specific copies with its sort of tutor effect, which is also just very cool. And if you're trying to play a game where you're, going forever and try to defend yourself, the Curator, both in terms of its card draw effect and in terms of a taunt, pretty good for that. So anyway, definitely, like I said, probably my favorite card in the reveal. Not necessarily a great one, but certainly one that I'm excited to build around. All right, well, here we have Firelands Portal, which is the 7 casting cost mage spell that people will hate having played against them in Arena for the New Age. This is, I think a neat card, and I do think it's a potentially powerful card in a environment that is somewhat powered down like Arena. But yeah, this is a card that I don't expect to see serious competitive play. It's just too expensive and too unreliable for what it does in terms of the context of constructed and ranked play. But I can definitely see this being a very powerful effect in Arena, because you can kill a minion and get a minion, and that's a pretty good deal. Obviously, it's not going to be able to kill on-curve minions, but anytime you're able to remove a significant threat of your opponent's, and 5 damage is going to be able to remove a pretty significant threat, as well as generate a threat of your own, that's pretty powerful, especially in a tempo-based format, or even value-based format. This is both tempo and value because it is providing you with removal plus body, as well as both of those in the same turn. for just 7 mana, and depending on the pace of the format, this can definitely be a very, very swingy card. So certainly not a constructed all-star, but one that I expect we will hear Kripparrian complaining about in Arena for years to come. And last, and sort of unceremoniously, the Enchanted Raven. You look at it and it's like, oh, this is kind of a boring card in some ways, but some of the most exciting cards from a bigger picture standpoint look the most boring on their face. Just a 1-cost 2/2. But it's a beast, and that's a big deal. It's a druid card, which helps push the sort of druid beast theme, and the fact that it's a 1-cost 2/2 helps push away from the druids being always ramp into big things decks. So I think that this is a very important card, and maybe of the cards we've seen, one of the most impactful as far as actual implications for constructed, because a 1-cost 2/2 already is very powerful. We haven't really seen 1-cost 2/2s. We haven't seen a 1-cost 2/2 at all. It's a 1-drop that you can play that isn't vulnerable to hero powers, which is a very big deal. One of the big issues of a lot of 1-drops in Hearthstone is that you play them, and your opponent can often just Fire Blast or Dagger or Shapeshift and kill it because it has 1 health. This does not. On top of that, being a beast means that it enables Mark of Yasharaj on turn 2, which is really powerful. A 1-drop that doesn't die to a hero power into Mark of Yasharaj, which makes it into a 4/4, which doesn't die to Fiery War Axe, and you've drawn a card in the meantime. That's very powerful. And I think that a lot of what the beast decks for Druid have missed so far in Standard, well, in Hearthstone in general, because this is the first time we've seen something like this, is a real way to make that kind of powerful tempo play. You've only really been able to play things like Druid of the Saber or Power of the Wild and then Mark of Yasharaj them, which is kind of off curve. You're playing 2 into a 2 and wasting a mana, and also just isn't really giving you something that necessarily is that much better than what you could possibly have from just spending your mana normally. But 1-drop and a 2-drop giving you a 4/4 is pretty huge. So I think that this is going to be a card that has a very big impact and potentially really carries the Beast Druid archetype into relevance in Standard. So look out, world. Here come the Beast Druids. All right, well, that is all we have so far for reveals for Karazhan. It's really exciting that the set is actually coming out in just a couple weeks. I believe August 11th is the intended date of the first wing opening, and you get the first mini encounter free, and then there is the first wing that you're going to be able to go through that week as well. It'll be really interesting to see what impact not only the adventure as a whole, but each week of the adventure has on competitive play in Hearthstone. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what cards will be available by what points, because it sounds like maybe there won't be anything available for the Europe preliminaries, but then the America preliminaries may have the first wing, and then certainly by the championships the following month, we'll see the whole of Karazhan available to be used. So very interesting stuff, very exciting stuff. I'm looking to party with Medivh. I hope you are too. That was bad. Ooh, that's good for me. All right, that's shaping. Hope we get at least a boost. Wow. Oh, nice shaping. That's better. That's better. It's dragon even in our dragon deck. Oh, look.